Welcome to the For You Leaders podcast, where we interview great leaders to give you practical solutions to grow your business and your leadership. We're going to talk to some CEOs you know, but others you may have never heard of, but you definitely can learn from them. They all have different styles, different approaches, but you have something you can learn from each and every one. I'm here with Kirk Dando, entrepreneur and partner to over 7,000 CEOs across the world. For the past 20 years, he's been working with great CEOs like the one you're going to hear about today. Hey, Kirk, tell us a little bit about today's podcast and who we're talking to.
Thanks, Chip. This is Rocky Turner. He's the CEO and founder of LPR Construction. They're one of the largest and most dynamic heavy industrial contractors and steel erection companies in the United States, actually working beyond the borders now a little bit. I have had the chance to work with Rocky and his company for a long time. It turns out, though, interestingly enough, as you'll hear, this company was not always his plan.
We traveled out to Colorado from Indiana to start a business. We weren't really sure what we were getting into, and in fact, we probably, if there'd been some adults that gave us good counsel, they would have talked us out of it.
When they came to Colorado, they realized they were in deep over their heads.
Well, in the beginning, we came out here to build houses in a market that was, in 1979, was interest rates were headed to about 18% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. I left a job teaching school when there was a lot of unemployment, and really the opportunity, if you looked at it, was not very good.
So what did they do to build one of the largest heavy industrial construction and steel erection companies in the United States?
In the end, we came out here and just put our heads down and worked hard. An opportunity came up to shift from home building to commercial steel erection. One of the founding partners had steel erection in his background, and I had a little bit of a summer I worked with him in the steel erection industry.
Now, almost 40 years later, what does LPR look like?
Well, we have about 500 employees.
My guess is you've probably visited or seen some of their projects.
America West Arena, we did the Florida Panthers and then the Miami Heat. I think the next big project we did was the Denver Art Museum. Yeah, we did the Miami Marlins baseball stadium. Right now we're doing the Atlanta Braves baseball stadium. Just this past year, we did our first venture up into Canada and did the Edmonton Oilers arenas.
Now, I want you to listen and learn from Rocky as we talk with him about his leadership style, what he's learned over the years, and things that you can take away from this. We caught Rocky on a bit of an off day. He was feeling a little bit sick, but I think you'll see his insights are still incredibly valuable. Well, no doubt LPR is a very, very successful company, and that's, I could spend a lot of time talking about that, but as the saying goes, behind every great man is a great woman, and I'm a firm believer that behind every great company is a great leader, and you know this, I've shared this with you, is I think you're one of the best, if not maybe the best leader that I've ever spent time with, learned from, grown from. And I think what makes it unique is I don't think you ever set out to be a great leader. I think you just set out to be a great person. And you may not know this, but as I talk to other leaders and teach them, one of the things that I tell them is there's all kinds of characteristics that go along with leadership, but there's really only three styles of leaders. There's leaders that are for you, there's leaders that are against you, and there's leaders that are for themselves. It's a pretty simple concept. You are, to me, the example of what a for you leader is all about. And so that's what I want to talk to you about. It may be a little bit uncomfortable for you to talk about yourself or see yourself in that light, but it's true. And I would just like to go through some questions and get your insights about it so you can help others that are going to be listening to this get a perspective on it. Goes beyond the processes and the systems. It goes beyond the jobs and the projects that we get, but it gets down to really how do you lead, that style of leading. What is your first recollection of really knowing that you were called to be a leader?
Well, first of all, it's very humbling that you put me in a category of possibly being a great leader. I see myself maybe more as somebody that tries to find consensus and really works with the group of people that are the leaders in our company to solve problems. I think from the very beginning, when I was just running a small crew, one of the things I would do is get everybody together and say, here are the problems we have, and look at the strengths of the people on the team and enlist them to be part of a solution. And anytime we've had problems, one of the things I do is to reach out to people within the company, people outside of the company, and just try to find a path forward. And often you might think that one way is the way you ought to go, but after talking to people, gathering information, reaching out to people that might be able to help, the right idea comes. And I think I've been pretty good at knowing a good idea when I hear it, but I don't have to be the guy that comes up with the idea. So I think that's a model that I've followed, and I think it's helped LPR over the years find the right path.
That's very true. Just the nuanced part of that is just the humility to ask for help, but also the confidence to trust your gut. And like you said, you kind of know a good idea when you hear it. And that's true of most people. I mean, they kind of know it, but a lot of times we don't ask that question. So every leader has what I call a tone that they set, kind of a tone from the top. How would you describe your tone from the top?
I try to be a calming influence in the business. I think there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of pressure in the business. And I try, as I'm working with people and talking to people, I try to be a calming influence and help when I think I can. And it's sort of like steering a big ship. You have to trust your people and you have to let your people do their jobs. But I, often look for things that I think might be pitfalls on the horizon and interject myself in those situations.
I call that a predictive leader.
There you go. Wonder where I've heard that before. And Kirk, I have to say, you have been a great influence on the company and a wonderful friend and mentor to me. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. My friendship is what I value most about our relationship for sure. It meant a lot to me and my family for sure. What has been some of the most difficult decisions or types of decisions you've had to make in your role?
Well, I think anytime you have to, tell somebody that they're not working, one of the books that what Good to Great is talks about finding the right seat on a bus for people. And, anytime you have to tell somebody they're not making it, not going to be part of the team, I think those are really tough decisions. We've always thought of the group of people we have as part of the LPR family. And when some of the people that are, have been instrumental in getting you to a point, to a level of sophistication, but it becomes apparent that they are no longer, they've kind of reached their limits. It's always hard to say goodbye to those people, whether we've said, it's time for you to go, or they just feel like they can't contribute anymore. And for the most part, that's kind of how it's happened. You push people to do something maybe they're not comfortable doing and get to a level that they aren't capable of getting to, and then they leave. And sometimes that's really been difficult.
If you had to give one piece of advice to your kids about being a leader, what would you tell them?
I think that some leaders think that they have to have all the answers, that they have to be clear, decisive. I like to not make snap decisions. I like to, talk to people about tough decisions. And I think, Kirk, you talk about, even if in the beginning you know where you want to end up, it's important that to get the people you're working with to want the red bike. But often I can recall coming into a room with a group of people trying to solve a really tough problem, and coming out of the discussion, and maybe, it's an hour or something with your group with a direction, but it was a different direction than what I maybe thought was the solution or the answer going in. So that's an example of trying to, being able to recognize a good idea when it comes. And it's not, I've never had to be the person that came up with the idea often. And I think it's important that you let it come from other people and give credit when it does. And I don't need to be the person that has all the answers or need to be, recognized as that person. I just want the company to do well and people to do well, and I'm happy for them when they do.
And I think you've done a remarkable job, and I think just because it's the nature of who you are, it's not something you get them to think about or have to be intentional about, it's just part of your DNA, is you earn trust of people because You separate the mistakes from the individual. You let them grow in that regard. I think what I have seen you do over years, and it was unintentional, but you did it, is you built benefit of the doubt. And I've seen some really difficult times around here where people have leaned in during those times and given you and given the leadership the benefit of the doubt, when quite frankly, there was enough reason there for them to have a lot of fear and want to hit the door and look for something else to do. Instead, what they did is they doubled down, and even to the degree where if they needed to be involved financially, they would have been willing to have done that. That's an indication of the level of care and trust that you have earned. People don't just do that because, they feel like they have to. They do it because of the relationship. And so as you think about your time as a CEO, founder, leader, whatever title you want to put on it, talk a little bit about just the relationships and what they've meant to you over your career.
Well, you talk about people making mistakes, and I remember early on reading, there was a 1 Minute Manager book that talked about a guy that had just made a huge mistake and cost the company $1 million. CEO brought the guy in, and the guy was expecting to get fired, and he said, "No, you just learned a lesson that cost the company $1 million, but I don't want you to go someplace else and take that knowledge and wisdom with you. I'm going to keep you right here." And, I guess as I look at things where people are, mistakes are being made, problems happen, I do give people the benefit of the doubt. And if I feel like they made a mistake and have learned from it, and it wasn't a situation where they knew that they shouldn't have done something and they did it anyway, I try to keep that wisdom within the company and let the company benefit from that experience.
One thing I want you to take away from today's concept is the 4U Leader. It is no coincidence that this is called the 4U Leader podcast. It's an overly obvious and embarrassingly simple concept, and I want you to think about this. Think about the leaders in your life. There's leaders that have been for you. Those are the individuals that care deeply about you. They care more about what they can put into you. They care more about you as an individual, where you're at in your journey, and how they can help you take that next step. There's other leaders that are against you. That's fairly rare. It's not very often that someone wakes up in the morning and puts a target on someone else's back and actually goes after them. And then there's other leaders that are for themselves. They're the individuals that are more interested in what they can get out of you. They're more interested in helping you think that they're for you, but at the end of the day, they're most interested in what benefits them, what benefits they're trying to accomplish, and how you might be able to help them get that done. So think about this. There's leaders that are for you, there's leaders that are against you, and there's leaders that are for themselves. I've found that the 4U leaders are the ones that make the real difference and have the biggest impact on growth. I want you to listen to the next podcast where we talk to Rocky about family in the business. This is always an interesting dynamic. It always has a lot of emotional issues tied around it. Rocky and his family have navigated this extremely well. I'll also share a little bit about what Rocky hired me for and what he actually got. I look forward to seeing you next time on the 4U Leader podcast.